before that you think you should. So whatever part makes you feel uncomfortable, that's about the right time to be talking about things like this. So, I mean, with a 2.5-year-old, you're not going to be talking about much other than, don't do that here, like that's not polite, that sort of level. But as I get older, again, just keep leading the ball. Do it before that you think that you should do it.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Dad Hat. Today's guest is Jeff Stewart, a healthcare consultant, molecular biologist, inventor, award-winning playwright, and father of 7. He has recently authored a book, Living: Inspiration from a Father with Cancer, which is what we're going to jump right into. How are you, Jeff?
I'm doing well. Thanks. I'm well under the circumstances.
Definitely. Man, very happy to have you. And I'm going to go ahead and jump right into this book that you've written. So July 11th of 2022 rolls around and you're going in to donate a kidney. And to your surprise, you were instead diagnosed with 2 types of cancer. So tell us how you got from that point to writing this book.
So after and it's always a surprise. It's always a surprise, Lee, when you get a cancer diagnosis. That's kind of the nature of cancer, that most of the time you find it out and you didn't have any idea. And for me, I had no symptoms whatsoever. So yes, it was a shock, I guess, and a surprise to get the diagnosis, and especially one where you get 2 different tumor types. As you said, my background's in molecular biology, and I consult for pharma companies. This is my job, is to understand these things. So I knew that 2 tumors, probably not a good thing. That they were 2 tumors in different places either meant I had a genetic disease, and then I really needed to think about what it meant for my kids, or I just got incredibly unlucky and I just had 2 different cancers. It turned out to be the latter. I just have 2 different cancers, and it was one of those things. And at first, I didn't really feel the need to do much, honestly. I mean, I posted on Facebook. I told the kids about it so that they wouldn't feel as though I were hiding something and that another shoe had to drop and maybe it's much worse and I'm just putting a good face on it. I did none of that. I really let them know exactly where it was. But at the time, at the beginning, they seemed like cancers that were very survivable. The kidney tumor that I had, the 5-year survival rate, I can look these things up. This is, as I said, kind of my job. The 5-year survival rate was like 95% or more. The 5-year survival rate for the cancer that was around my intestine seemed to be in the 93% range. So, it's not great to have, those few percentages more of death around you, but it didn't seem all that bad. It was after I had surgery and the pathology report came back that it became much, much more serious. The kidney cancer was curable and cured by surgery, but the intestinal tumor was not an intestinal tumor. It was a gastric cancer, which, I mean, what does it mean to have gastric cancer versus an intestinal tumor? In this case, it was the difference between curable and easily treated with targeted chemotherapy and possibly very lethal and possibly lethal very fast. And so that changed things. And that's what really gave me the impetus and the drive to write down those things I needed my kids to know if I weren't to make it. The average time to death if the cancer spreads. And at the time that we had done the pathology, it looked like the cancer may already have spread. The average time to death was about 5 months. So I really needed to move fast if I wanted to get those things out for my kids that they needed. And I had found out from posting on social media that just explaining what's going on with me with cancer was helpful to people, either going through cancer themselves or cancer that they had had with somebody that was a family member that didn't know what was going on. It's one of the, I don't want to say dubious benefits, but one of the benefits of being a cancer patient who describes what's going on and has at least some grounding in the field, in molecular biology and in how pharma works, because I have that, I also get cancer patients that reach out to me. So I had people reach out to me that would say things like, I've told nobody but my priest, my wife, and my boss, but I have this cancer, and they just need somebody to talk to. So that is a gift.
Definitely. So you mentioned you have your background in healthcare and biology and such. How did that make you? Did you enjoy, or not enjoy, but was it better that you had that understanding of what was going on, or how did that affect the diagnosis?
Yeah, if all of us can have the benefit of not needing any of this stuff. You don't need to know any of this stuff. You do have to listen to your oncologist, who's gone to however many years of undergraduate, plus 4 years of medical school, plus 4 years of residency, or 7, and is an expert in this field. Oncologists follow science. So everything I can do is more or less just catching up to where the oncologists are and becoming a pseudo expert in that time. So you don't need to do any of that. But what it really helped me to get comfortable with is when people would give well-meaning advice. Eat this food. Talk to this doctor who is promising 100% cure rates. Try this alternative therapy. Or even things that are sensible, but far too early for me. Like they just can't possibly save me. Things that are like treatments that are exciting in a mouse, but are, from my training, I know, are 12 years probably minimum out from being able to treat anyone. It has no bearing on my cancer. Like those things I can set aside. I don't have to worry about those things. I don't have to be distracted by those things. There's only so much time and so much energy a cancer patient has. There are decisions we must make. There are things that require our focus. There are things that only a father or a mother can do with their kids, or a husband or wife can do with their spouse, that if you're not spending the time doing those things because you're tracking down whether or not you need to eat so many lemons in a day, or have some treatment that was based on peach pits that was disproven in the 1980s, but people still believe, but you have to pay $50,000 for and go to Mexico because you can't get it in the US or something like that. I mean, those things exist. We exist now in a sea of misinformation and disinformation and frauds. And that is something that I am incredibly thankful that I do have my training to help kind of screen through that stuff. Makes it easier.
Yeah, definitely. I can definitely understand that. So going back to the book, you have a few, I want to speak on the style a little bit about on your book. So you have a few different threads going on through there. You have the narrative of, your actual diagnosis. You seem to be speaking directly to your descendants, to your children in some of the book, but you also have these inspirations, is what you call them. I see them as life lessons because they're excellent. I mean, just quite amazing. But where did you come up with these inspirations, and who do you hope to inspire?
So who do I hope to inspire? First and foremost, my kids. These are the things that the sayings, the ways of thinking about the world that make life easier. They help us to avoid hard times. They help us to endure hard times. So at least for me, even simple things like get some sleep. If things seem really bad, just get some sleep. It won't be all better in the morning, but it will be better. That's something that if you don't have that little tool in your toolkit, then life at 3 a.m. can get pretty miserable. Or something as, I hope, profound as, it's nice to be smart. It's nice to look beautiful. It's nice to be really healthy, but none of that matters if you aren't kind. Kindness is truly the only thing that matters. You don't have that in your toolkit, then you start to just worry about what other people think about you a bit too much.
Yeah, I agree. Yet one of them, which I believe is in the beginning of the book, you talk about noticing your good luck just as much as your bad luck. And that was something that I was like, I probably don't do this enough, but it's profound because it makes the bad luck seem just the same as the good luck. It's just part of life. It's just something that you're going to have to deal with. It's just, the life that we live. And it was excellent. And I appreciate you so much for writing the book in general.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that idea of noticing your good luck. And we haven't talked about it, but among the many lucky things that happened from cancer was the fact that it was diagnosed in the first place. I had no symptoms. I wasn't looking to have the diagnosis. Normally, the diagnosis is found when you have a gastric gastroendoscopy. You have a tube down your throat. I had that a month before I got a CT scan, but I had a gastric bypass 10 years ago. So there was nothing to see. They weren't looking in the part of my stomach that had cancer. It was bypassed in the first place. Gastric cancer is usually quite, so if I hadn't tried to donate a kidney, never would have been spotted, or at least it wouldn't have been spotted until I was, it would have been lethal. There's just no two ways about that. That's good luck. When you see that good luck and you go, wow, that really was lucky. Not, wow, I was so smart or I was so good, pat myself on the head because I tried to donate a kidney. Like, as long as you don't take upon yourself the all good luck is because I'm so great, but wow, that was good luck. Then when something bad happens, you don't beat yourself up about it. You don't get so mad at the world for just dumping on you, because the world is going to dump on you sometimes. But if you saw the good luck, you're like, well, you know what? That was pretty lucky. If I'm right about it, yeah, okay, it came up tails this time, the coin did, but it came up heads 5 times before that.
Yeah, it's almost like disowning the luck. You don't own the good luck, you don't own the bad luck, and I took that to heart, and I loved it very much. So, you have 7 children, and with this diagnosis, how has that changed your mindset and your perspective on life?
So I think all of us, at least I do, I suspect you do, I suspect most of us kind of live in maybe a 10-year time frame, maybe a 5-year time frame. What's the best thing I could do in the next 5 years? What's the best thing I could do in the next 10 years? Like that's I might invest a certain number of years and I might choose a new job, those kinds of things. Am I going to really go out to play trivia night with my kids and my wife? I don't really want to do that, so I'm probably not going to do that tonight. There's a perspective one has when you have time, but when you don't know if you have time, you have to live for 5 months and for 50 years, both of which are completely plausible outcomes for me. We haven't talked about my prognosis, but my prognosis is bizarrely binary. Either my cancer will progress, that is, progression is not a good thing. It means that it's spread throughout my body. If it does that, it is 100% lethal and very rapidly lethal, an average of 5 months lethal. If I am already cured, which is about a coin flip possibility, is about 50-50 on each of these possibilities. I've had radiation, I've had chemo. I have a reasonable chance of being cured already at this point, in which case I'll live a normal life. So that's the reality I kind of live in. Things have to be good for short term and good for long term, which is kind of a trip to figure out, and certainly a very different sort of thinking from what I had thought about before. So I do go out to trivia night with my wife when before I might have been like, I don't really like the nachos. Maybe I don't really want to go to.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it reminds me of a previous episode we've had. I had a philosophy professor talk about meditating on one's death. And I was thinking in my mind, I'd never had that idea in my head before. And, what kind of value would that bring me? Well, I tried. And it's something that will make you, it's almost like seasoning life a little bit. It's almost enjoying the moments. You have to now. You must enjoy the moments. And I hope that's what you're doing too, because, that is, and I trust that you are, because you've written this book. You've done so many things in your life. Your story without the book is inspiring. So, man, I'm glad that that perspective has come about for you, and thank you. What are the most important lessons you and your spouse have taught your children?
That's a hard question, and a hard question that I wrote a book about. It's still a hard question. My kids really are kind kids. They are. They are. I'm kind of introverted, but our house is filled constantly with people, young adults that need a place to hang out. That's nice. My kids do that. And so I am just thrilled and honored and blessed to feel that whatever we did as parents helped instill that in our kids. My wife is super kind. She's just a kind person. And it shows in what our kids have done. This is not to say that kids do everything we want them to do. That's another thing I think, and maybe a lesson, a way of thinking that is helpful. It's one of the kind of 100 inspirations I put out there. With teenagers in particular, it can end up being a dominance fight. So let me explain what I mean by that. It's really natural for us to want to assert dominance over our kids. I mean, at the beginning, don't touch the stove, don't go across the street. I mean, you just assert your authority over them. You have to keep them alive in some cases. I love the show The Dog Whisperer, that show that kind of teaches you about dogs have dominance. So like, once they're kind of in the place, you get dominance over a dog, and then they follow you as kind of a pack leader. But our kids they have to grow up. They have to get out from under the dominance. It's natural. If we want that to happen, we want them to be able to make good choices. But that means they made the choice, not us. Even if we can make a better choice, even if we're wiser and smarter, it doesn't matter. The whole point is they have to make the choice. So we have to decline these dominance fights as we see them. Otherwise, they bite us. And well, that's all they know what to do. It's because the leash was too tight. So if there's something also that may not be obvious about how we raise kids, especially teens, it's really to learn to back off. Once you find yourself in that dominance fight, that fight of wills, we're losing at some level. They're losing. And it's our job to take a back seat and learn to take a back seat, which is hard, especially hard for good drivers.
Yeah. It reminds me of a thing that we're going through, me and my wife. We have a 2.5-year-old, just one. And it's, a young father.
Kids.
Kind of inspired me to do this podcast, was fatherhood. I just didn't know a ton about it. I wanted to know more. And so my son has started to act out when he doesn't get what he wants. Shows a little bit of, he doesn't cry all the time, but it's outrage is what it is. Right. And yeah, and sometimes it's a healthy outrage. Let me just say that. And my go-to is, hey, don't do that at all, because that's not how you get what you want. I want you to have what you want. I want you to have what you need and everything, but that's not how to do it. And my wife always says, you have to understand his feelings, because he's not just going to do it because you said so. And that is a lesson that I'm learning right now, how to let them make the decision, and how to back off. I loved how you said, take a back seat to it, because that's literally what it takes, right? You can't, it has to be their decision. Would you say that's true?
Well, do you want them to make the right choice, or do you want them to learn to make the right choice? Now, sometimes you have to make the right choice. You have to get them to make the right choice. There's no,
crossing the street, right?
Crossing the street. Yeah. Oh, I want to drink that. I don't think you want to drink that. No, you are not. Put that down. Yeah. Don't eat the dirt. Or though that might not be so bad, but you know what I mean? Like, there are things that you have to just keep them alive. Other things you want them to learn to make the right choice. I lead small teams of consultants for work. It's a very hard transition for really good consultants to become a good manager. The best consultants have the hardest time switching to becoming a good manager because they just want to do the work because they can do the work better and they can and faster. But that's not the job. The job is to help others so that they learn to do the work. And that becomes more and more your role the older and older the kids get until by the time they're adults, then you're their mentor, not their director.
All right. So I want to go back to a word you've been mentioning, and that's kindness. And if we can unbox that somehow a little bit, because I think there's a ton of people out there that mistake being nice for being kind. And I think that it's something, being nice is, it has the face value of, I'm being nice to you. But being kind literally means what to you?
If I were to make a distinction between those two things, I think I might actually get to social media fights. So in social media, especially on Facebook, where I'm often actually friends with these people or know them from growing up, not always, but often know them, and we have a disagreement. The nice thing to do is sometimes just to say, yeah, well, let's agree to disagree and walk away from it. Sometimes the kind thing to do is to give them what helps them the most, which is a subtly different thing. It's not necessarily just being polite, though polite is a good thing to do, but giving them what actually helps them. Sometimes what actually helps someone is to tell them that this is not right. You are not doing the right thing. This will hurt you. Sometimes what will actually help someone is to walk away. That does happen. Where and sometimes the thing that will actually help someone is to take away their ability to hurt others. As long as you actually care about the person and give them what you to the best of your ability, you think will help them. That to me is kindness. That's the thing that we aspire to do.
Wow. Amazing. I want to go back a little bit. I want to go back to your younger days and a little bit how you grew up or how you were brought up. You've done all these things. You're a healthcare consultant. You're a trained biologist. You're an inventor. What have you invented?
So there was a couple different things. So there's a way to analyze virus sequences and understand them, and that's something that I have a patent on with other inventors, and we have a patent pending right now for what's called copay assistance design. So a particular way of ways that pharma companies pay for copay assistance, like pay for copays for your copays. All in the weeds, but there are ways to optimize those and make those as good as possible for the patient and for the pharma company. And so those are things that I have either patents or patents pending on. A couple of other things that we file patent applications on, but never went anywhere.
Okay. But my point was going to be, you've done all these things, but then you also are an award-winning playwright, which is which is a very creative thing. I've never met anybody that is science-based, math-based type of person like you seem to be, but also have a creative side. Do you attribute that to how you grew up or genetics, or what do you attribute that to?
A lot of reading, a lot of reading. And I've been in a lot of plays over the years too. So there's that. So I at least have I know what it's like as an actor to read the lines that when they work and when they don't work. So I have a little bit of that going on. But reading, always was reading a book. Oftentimes books that would help me on trivia, but that's not the only thing that I would read for. Just a lot of reading. Read a lot and helps.
I gotcha. Okay. What about how did you grow up? You grew up in Oregon, is that right?
I did. Yeah. I grew up in rural Oregon, a place called the Dalles, which if you played the Oregon Trail game, you will have been through the Dalles and make the choice whether or not you're going to ride the river or go through the Barlow Road. One of those two things you have to do on the Columbia River. And that's where I grew up. It's a small town. It's about 12,000 people when I was growing up there, a little bit less, but was the largest city within about 100-mile radius all the way to Portland at the time, I think probably all the way to Tri-Cities, which is, more than 100 miles away.
Wow. Okay.
So a big town in the area, but not a big town.
Okay. And your parents, you grew up with both of them, and how did they influence you?
Well, they were both teachers. I say in the book, my mom set my moral compass, and I think that's true. She would raise me reading The Hiding Place and other stories of people that were marginalized on the fringes and were helped were the helpers. And that really, I think, helped me to be cognizant of when people needed help. And to look out for those points. My dad, extremely hard worker and someone who came from an even smaller town. If I'm remembering, there were 300 people in the town then and 300 people now in Mount Vernon, Oregon. And when people heard he was going to college, that someone was going to college, they laughed. That's the kind of place he grew up. But both of them ended up being teachers and certainly taught me. So without that, I don't know where I would have been. Without those, I have a great debt to discharge. Definitely.
And siblings? Do you have any siblings?
I do. I have two sisters. Angie, who's older, is of the two, but both of them younger than me. Angie is a psychologist, clinical psychologist in Massachusetts, and Amy is still in Oregon, in the flyover country of Oregon. She is a police detective, state trooper.
Wow. Okay. So, a child of two teachers, and did you go to the school that they taught at?
So my mom ended up coming back to substitute teach. By that time, my dad had moved on just to doing business around town with his various jobs. I never had my mom as a teacher, or if I did, it was as a substitute, and I don't have a clear memory of it. But they certainly knew the teachers and were well integrated into the teaching community.
Okay. So if you were speaking to all the fathers out there right now, what would be your advice to help them be the best father they could be?
You're not in competition with your kids. I think a lot of us are. Our kids are not. We're not in competition with them. We don't have to be better than them. We don't have to. We don't have to do any of that. We have to help them be the best that they can be. Does it reflect on us? Sure, it does. Their successes become our successes to some success. Their failures become our failures to some level. But you know the difference, and you will know the difference when you are in competition with them and trying to beat them or trying to have them be under you versus really wishing them the absolute best to be the absolute best people that they can be. That helps to view it that way.
So I read a book a few months ago. It's called The Conscious Parent, and the author speaks on that a little bit. And she says one of the things that fathers do is they try to make a better version of themselves. And that's a bad strategy. Do you think that's a bad strategy? And do you think that's what's happening in America sometimes?
I hadn't thought of it that way. And honestly, I do kind of want to make better versions of myself in some ways. So I'm maybe guilty of this to some extent. All the kids are different. I do have 7 kids, and they are different, but you see the aspects of you in them also. So I don't know that I fully ascribe to that being a terrible, horrible thing to do. Make them better versions of what they can be seems the right focus, but they aren't. I mean, they're extended. They share half my genes. Yes. So,
I've had this conversation a couple times, and I was not in direct disagreement with that, idea, but it seemed like, well, genetically they are versions of us, at least a little bit, and especially if they're biological. And the lessons that I've learned myself are a lot of times going to lend themselves to my children. It seems. I only have a 2.5-year-old, so I can't say that for sure yet, but it seems like not the worst strategy in my opinion, but I also think that it can't be the only strategy.
Yeah, it does seem like if it were the only strategy, there would be a trap there that you wouldn't be open to them being different. You would try just to make them just exactly you, and that is doomed.
Yeah, I agree with that. I definitely agree with that. Okay, so, man, how old is your oldest child?
My oldest is, I think, 31. I have to always do the math on this. Yeah, 31.
31. Okay, so I'm 33 years old, and you've been a father for 31 years. How have you changed? Was there a drastic change from 30 years ago to 31 years ago in the way you thought about life?
Sure, there must have been. I think one of the things that a lot of us, if you think about how much you've changed in the last 10 years, you go, wow, I've changed a lot. And then you ask yourself how much you think you're going to change in the next 10 years. You'd be like, no, I'll be about the same. But in fact, it's never the same. You always will change and go through those. So some of the things I did as a younger parent, I mean, this is a kind of a gross and obvious one. I spanked kids. I would never do that again. I mean, all the data say it just doesn't work. In fact, it makes things worse. So don't do that. I wish I hadn't, The idea about being in competition with your kids. Sometimes I was in competition with my kids. I wish I hadn't done that. Don't do that. That's not a good idea. So there are things that I definitely would change, but other things that I did, maybe more applicable even to the stages that you are now, is where you're just a kind of a narrator to your kid's existence. Now we're walking. Now we're going to the store. This is the store, all that stuff. I think that makes life meaningful. It helps set them in place. Being really scientific about things and just explaining things to kids so they get an idea of how the world works and how it really is. I think I'm glad I did it then, and I don't think I'd change that now. I think I would do the same thing. And I think I'd still be reading Big A, Little A, What Begins with A, Aunt Annie's Alligator, AAA. I mean, that isn't going away. I'm going to do all those things. So some things were, I think, I haven't evolved in my thinking on some of those things. I think some of those things were probably the right thing to do.
Okay. So without getting political, what about protecting innocence? That's something that has been coming up in my thoughts recently, and a lot of people that I know. In Texas, obviously, we're a pretty conservative place. We, most of us think that we shouldn't be talking about sex and all the things until at least middle school. What's your thoughts on that?
So I'll tell you what the data say. So I did some look into the data on this because I wanted to know. A lot of things are all over the place, but I will say a couple things. Talking about it in excruciating detail to the point where you feel like it's uncomfortable for you, it's probably a good thing, because comprehensive, fact-based sex education has the following effects. People have fewer kids before they're married. They delay first intercourse with more information, not less. Like, you give them more, you think, oh, I'm going to tempt them into it. No, it's the opposite. They wait longer the more information that they have, and they have fewer sex partners lifetime, and they have fewer sexually transmitted infections. That's a lot of good. So as a father, I decided I needed to be pretty explicit, and really explain what's going on. And part of that also is, I'm religious also. So I don't want my kids to have not just sexual experiences that they would find to be disturbing, though that's a good thing, or too early, though that's a good thing. But I want them to wait until marriage for the majority of their sexual experiences, their partner's sexual experiences, certainly. So since I want that for my kids, I want them to not have things like curiosity, or misinformation drive them to do something that is that I don't want as a religious person. I think if you think about somebody at this 2.5-year-old stage, there's not much that's going to be there, but to the point where if you would explain what an egg is, and a chicken, then you're in the place where if you explain things using words that would maybe embarrass them if they were 12, it's not going to embarrass them when they're kids. They're going to be like, okay. Whatever. I mean, it's just another thing about the world. I think you'll find it easier the earlier you start on something like sex education and the science of it, while you can. And the earlier you do, the better it is. Don't set up one big talk. Here's the talk. Just keep it as part of your daily life, little tiny things. And when they get old enough that they can run away, then you have these conversations in the car and they can't get out.
Okay. Yes, I love where that. So the more knowledge, the better. It's almost like you're giving them the content to process themselves, and they will process it most of the time, is what you're saying.
Oh yeah, and by the way, they're gonna find out. They're just gonna not find out from you. They're gonna find out from porn and from their friends, and neither of those is usually all that good of sex education.
Sure. Just what do you think is the age? I know it's going to differ between children because they, grow at different rates, but where should you start?
Before that you think you should. So whatever part makes you feel uncomfortable, that's about the right time to be talking about things like this. So, I mean, with a 2.5-year-old, you're not going to be talking about much other than, don't do that here, like that's not polite, that sort of level. But as I get older, again, just keep leading the ball. Do it before that you think that you should do it. If nothing else, you're going to be protecting them from somebody who can exploit them elsewhere. If they don't know that I shouldn't be touched here, that's private, then, and they don't know the words to use, they just are calling it their pee-pee place or something like that, then they won't have the words to tell you that what this person did is not right. They'll come to you right away once they kind of know that they should. You got to prepare them before that happens, not after the fact. So I'd say earlier than you want to. So does it feel uncomfortable? You're probably in the right spot then, unfortunately. That's just how it is.
Yeah. A lot of good things are uncomfortable,
That is true.
Yep. Okay. So, here's another one. I've heard lots of talk about, declining birth rates and how that's going to affect society in the next 20, 30, 40 years. Is that an issue that we should be thinking about?
So now I'm putting on a kind of an economist hat when I say something like this. I mean, I have 7 kids. You see where I've kind of come down on the issue. I think that people can learn a lot from their kids, and it's good and right to raise kids. So that's what I think should happen. When I put the economist hat on, I see this is nothing this is in the book. So I'm just kind of saying what I think from an economics perspective. You need a lot of people that are productive workers to pay for people who are in end of life. That is just math. There's no two ways about it. We used to have about 5.5 productive workers for every retiree. We are down to, I believe 2.5, and we'll be down to 2 within about 5 years. So that says that you need to get productive workers in fast. And that also means, and we aren't going to have enough sex to have that happen. It is just not going to happen. So that means if you don't want to have that kind of collapse, that it is going to be, and is already, a global fight for the best, most productive workers there are from other countries. And that is just the way it is. You don't like it? Well, sign up for a different universe.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm a guy, I'm from Texas already. A lot of conservatives they're taking our jobs, which has always been a crazy mindset in my opinion, because at the end of the day, not an economist, but I do understand that, the more labor force we have, the less, the labor cost is, and the better our inventions are, and the more progress we can actually make. But not to get into migration, I think you're exactly right. I think that, we are declining quickly, and there's honestly lots of countries that are in the same boat that are, it's not good. So, let's move on. I want to go back to the book though, because, you'd mentioned, this topic's not in the book. What is your favorite piece of inspiration that you wrote in the book?
I would say the kindness one is probably my favorite one there. As a writer, I do like the following too. I put them together. Most of them, there's a little explanation that goes with it. There are two that are one sentence explanations, and they go together. One is smart people read. If you want to be smart, you got to read books. But the next one, you can't learn to ride a bike by reading a book. There are some things you just have to live to learn. And those two things, I think, really highlight what one can do and can't do with reading.
Sure. So as a avid reader for, it seems, most of your life, how much critical thinking comes into when you're reading a book or someone else's work?
So if at this point in my life, if the book isn't interesting to me, I'm just going to throw it away. There have now been 2 books that I have thrown away as I started the last chapter. It just wasn't worth even reading the last chapter. And I feel no guilt over doing either of those. There's a book I picked up and bought twice and I threw away twice also because it was just that bad. But I had hope that I was wrong the first time. I'm going to give it another chance. I was in an airport, I bought it, and no, it was terrible. And so I threw it away. So there's that. It's got to be good for me to keep reading it. It just has to make me want to turn the next page. And if it doesn't make me want to turn the next page, then it has failed in its basic job as a book. So that's what I do these days. It's a little bit different from what I would have done. I would have slogged through it when I was younger. What's
your split fiction versus nonfiction?
So I'm reading a lot more nonfiction these days than I did before. I used to read, I would say, pretty much solely science fiction and fantasy. That's all I would read. Now I find a lot more joy in really good nonfiction than I ever did before. So I'm maybe 50-50 these days.
Gotcha. I gotcha. So you've written this book. It's basically a message to your children. How are your children reacting to the diagnosis?
So at first, different kids that reacted differently. Some of them just started immediately making Breaking Bad jokes, which is fun. And it does relieve some of the pressure from me to keep it light on something like this, on something that's a hard topic. But of course, those things also covered up or, a bit of a veneer on top of, oh my gosh, what does this mean? So there's that. You have to work through it with each of them. Some of them in reading the book, are either telling me, you know what, you feel really bad about that, Dad, when you were a jerk to me when you did this and this and this, but I barely remember. It doesn't matter that much, which is nice. Makes me feel a little bit less guilty about the time that I was a jerk to some of my kids. And then other times, they are kind of saying that I read it and I was crying at work. So I'm getting kind of the spectrum of it. I don't need it to be everything for them today, but I do hope that it is something for them in the future if I were to die from this. So that's why I wrote Living: Inspiration from a Father with Cancer. I wanted to inspire them if I am not here to be able to do so.
Man, I bet they're so appreciative of that. I can't imagine them not being appreciative of that. And Man, your story is, I can't believe just your tone and how you're carrying yourself right now. Most people would be, distraught and just not even able to carry themselves. What has made you this way? What has made you strong, stand up tall, and try to inspire your children? What do you attribute that to?
So I'm going to think probably religion has got to play a huge role in that. I mean, if you, as I do, hope for and believe in an afterlife, then, you just do your best with what you can here on mortality. And it's an important part of existence, but it's not the only part of existence. So there's a part of that has to be from that. People that are religious are happier. They are. And maybe that's part of it too. That gives a little bit of resilience. So I think that's got to be a big part of it. Part of it also is anytime you've done something super hard, then the next hardest thing, it doesn't matter that much. I have given presentations in front of Nobel laureates, and I've been on Jeopardy in front of millions of people. So these things make it so when you have the next hardest thing of presenting a really hard discussion in front of a CEO of a pharma company, I've had worse. I've had harder audiences. I've had worse days. So those things all make, and I think that you'll find it true. And I tell my kids that it's true also of their own life. It's why it's so important sometimes to choose to do hard things so that the next thing is not so hard, or choose to do something that is really, is out there and difficult, but meaningful. So the next thing that you do is just old hat. Now, cancer is not old hat to me, but a lot of the pieces are. You aren't going to be phased once you've done things that are very hard.
Definitely. That's a common theme in the podcast so far, is going through a hard struggle makes you a better person basically every time. And boy, your struggle has, it's inspiring. Like I've said 10 times on the show already, but it's an amazing story. I want to touch back on religion for a second, because I have a not an issue, but I have this thing in my mind that I can't get over, where, the idea of a afterlife devalues the current life that we live in. And that is kind of, I would say, the biggest barrier for me to commit to a religion. What would you say to somebody like me?
No, that seems sensible. I mean, look, if I were born in East Asia, I would find it inconceivable that or very unlikely that I would ever be part of the religion I'm part of right now. So I can't say you're wrong. It would be wrong of me to say you're wrong. I think it's most important to try to live a good life. And I think you will find, whether or not you are religious or not religious, that if you choose to live life to help other people and make that your goal, that you will find that you bizarrely, or you're just happier, and you'll just do better in the life that you live. Now, maybe there is a life after this life, and maybe none of this life matters, but that isn't what you normally are going to get from most religions. Most of them are mine and others are going to point you to doing well in this life and doing good in this life as preparation for the next. So if you want to avoid the trap of none of this matters, I mean, just, whatever it's nihilism, then I would look for the religions that say that this life is something that is as preparation and has meaning into the next life, and you probably won't be in that same trap.
Yeah, I don't feel that way. Maybe I am a believer. I just haven't sorted it out yet.
Well, yeah, I mean, and not that I blame you. I mean, that's you got to find those things that help you to live well and be good. And that's got to be enough. That's got to be enough, Lee. Don't you think?
I do. Jeff, thank you so much for being on the Dad Hat.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, sir.